Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn. Welcome. And today we're talking about illness and disease as a spiritual path. So we usually think, so let me just start by saying, for me, uh, life in this body is I'm a spiritual being. I'm a being, a divine aspect of the divine, an aspect of the divine, and chose to have this human experience, being in this vehicle, this vessel. And so I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And in choosing to do that, a spiritual journey. It's a human, but there's the spiritual part of myself is having all kinds of experiences as well. I truly believe that we have chosen to come into these bodies on the planet or anywhere else we choose to go. But in this case, we're here in these human bodies to learn and to grow and to have certain experiences so that we get to know ourselves. In a sense, we get to go, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to experience joy and pleasure and happiness? Let's go to Disneyland, or let's have this experience that's really truly devastating. So we know that experience of devastation. So some of you might go, well, why would we want to do that? Well, as a spiritual being, where there's an infinite possibility to experience life in its fullness, these emotions are things, my understanding is that we can experience here on the planet, on Earth, that may not be able to be experienced or learned or treasured from any other place in the universes. So we come here and go, this is the experience I want. This is what I want to know about. This is what I want to learn about myself. Christian Sundberg, I think his name is very clear about his memory of being on the other side and deciding, hey, I'm going to have a human experience, and it's going to be very, very hard and difficult so that I can learn and grow myself, my capacity to be truly empowered in love and light. So I love the way that he experienced that and shared that, because it's like, yeah, that's what I believe a lot of us are doing, is deciding we want to enliven ourselves and grow our capacity, up-leveling ourselves to experience the power of love, the power of light, the power of healing, which we'll talk about today. So as we do that, we engage in situations and circumstances and experiences on this planet that challenge us in so many ways. And so one of those ways is disease and illness. So Marge Franke is here. Hi, Marge. Thanks for being here. And somebody else is here too. And please say hello if you will, and let me know that you're here. So we're here to have human experiences. We're here to learn who we are, not just as a physical body, not just as an egoic person that goes about doing what needs to get done, but we realize that there's another aspect of ourselves that we know is there, and we can feel, and we can say things like, I watched myself do this, or I saw myself do that. So there's this witness part that we're aware of. And the more that we're aware of that witness part, we become more aware of that's kind of who we really are, as the full spiritual self. And then we're able to distinguish that self from what we think of as the egoic self or the small self. We can distinguish that from the physical body and the physical reality, this vessel that we're in. So as we're able to do that, we become more clear about, oh, here's this part that perhaps is also engaged and has an intention for being here in this vessel. And so when we begin to pay attention to that part, we become more wise. We become more intelligent. We begin to utilize the intelligences, all of our intelligences, so that we can have a more fulfilling experience, and we're more likely to have well-being and whole being, which is what this month's topic is. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about illness as a spiritual path today, which sounds like a lot of fun, right? Right? So if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to this channel and like this video. So that lets me know that what I'm saying and what I'm offering to you is of value. And it lets me know that it's a good thing to maybe create more videos like this. So let me know that you liked it, and please subscribe so that you're giving me that information. That would be great. So every once in a while, I'm going to look over here to my notes so that I can stay somewhat connected to you and to what I want to make sure I say today. Whoops, on this particular topic. So part of what I want to talk about is well-being and whole being. Let's look at that. When we're in a state of whole being, when we're in a state of well-being, two things. Number one, we're in the present moment. Number two, we're not in fear. It's pretty clear. And if it's not accurate, leave a comment below or in the chat and tell me. Oops. Oh, Marge says it does not sound like fun, but maybe necessary. When we can look at this topic from a way that's less fearful, that's what I was just going to get to, then it can be more interesting or intriguing, or necessary, like you said, Marge. But when we're in a state of whole being and well-being, and I would say 99% of the planet, if not 100%, would say, I want that whole being and well-being, then we have to look at a couple of things that are true. One is, again, we are in the present moment, we're in the now. And we're not in fear. So pretty simple, pretty easy, not easy, but simple to think about. And when we think about illnesses and diseases, we begin to worry. So fear triggers us like that. And that is the first thing to go, oh, wait, all right. Well-being, whole being, no worry, no fear. Okay, great. And so we can begin to look at illnesses and diseases, symptoms, indications from a more clear perspective. In the Ho'oponopono, I'm sorry, I get that wrong all the time. Ho'oponopono prayer. What we're trying to come up with, and what their orientation is there's no data. And when there's no data, there's no fear. In a sense, there's no data. It's like, oh, if I have a symptom, for instance, I had a little skin cancer up here, and it's like, I could go, oh my God, it's skin cancer. I'm going to die, or I'm going to get my face ripped off, or I'm going to get surgery or radiation and all these terrible, horrible things. And it's like, now I'm full of data, right? I'm full of data. That's scary. But if I go, oh, there's a spot here, it might be cancer, but skin cancer is highly curable. It's highly healable. I know how to take care of myself in really good ways. And so I lower the levels of fear that immediately come up when we think about illnesses. I had a client this morning, and she said, I'm worried about my throat. It's been bothering me lately, and I'm worried about it. And then after that, she shared with me that there's so many ways that she is not speaking her truth. She's not expressing her own voice. She's not sharing her emotional self. She's not even allowing herself to know what those emotions are. It's too scary. So that she's worried that she has these symptoms, it's kind of like, wait a second. We know that when you're not taking care of certain parts of your body and your chakras, we know that there's a potential for illness and dis-ease to show up. So we shouldn't be worried. I'm not judging her, but it's like it's interesting how we do that. We go to worry as opposed to going, wow, for a very long time, I know for me, I've been acting certain ways that are harmful for my body. And so if I begin to have symptoms of dis-ease in that part of the body, why am I surprised? Why am I surprised? And but I am, and most of us are if we and so many of us in terms of we want well-being, but we don't treat ourselves well, and then we're surprised when we get lumps and we get uh, heart problems, or we get um, any kind of problem. We get surprised. Oh my God, I can't believe it. But we have disregarded ourselves for so long that it shouldn't be such a surprise, and yet it is. So this is another element of how do we stay in the present moment? How do we be present to ourselves? How do we be present to our whole being, and take care of ourselves? As I was doing some research for today's topic, um, three things came up. One is this book, which I've shared with you in past videos, Radical Remission by Kelly Turner. And what Kelly says is this is about surviving cancer against all odds. But the odds are based on limited thinking, limited research. But now they know there are 9 key factors that can make a real difference in whether a person is healthy and in well-being or they're not. And so I'll just read these to you quickly. So the 9 things, there's 9 things that everyone did who reversed their cancer and actually healed their cancer. There's 9 things. There's 75 variables that anybody could do, but these were the 9 that everyone did. So one is to have a strong reason to live. Now, if we look at my well-being or your well-being and whole being, do you have a strong reason to live? Do you have a strong reason to grow your capacity to thrive and be whole? And that's a really good question just to even start with is, do you have a strong reason not only to live, but to thrive and to perhaps shift your diet or shift the way that you're being in your life? It's just a really good question, I think. Do you have a strong reason to have a great life? Another one is deepening your spiritual connection. So I talk about this all the time, and this is what this is about in terms of spiritual connection and our spiritual. How do you see yourself as an aspect of the divine? Yourself as a being, a universal being, and is how do you see yourself, but how do you see everyone and everything in that way? And is there a preciousness and a reverence in life, or is it just something that comes and goes and you're done and that's it? So that's a really good piece too, is deepening your spiritual connection. In whole being, we're talking about not just our physical well-being or that we have enough money in the bank and so we feel secure and stable and safe. But then there's the other part, the witness part, that part that also is needing nurturance and needing acknowledgement of what that need is, which quite often is meaning. So often when people lose a sense of meaning, when life loses its meaning, that's when there's a decline. That's when there's a sense of increase in suicide. And quite often I see that we cultivate dis-ease out of that sense of I don't have meaning, I don't have any purpose, it doesn't make sense for me to work hard to have a great life. People think this way. I know I thought this way. And so we're learning how to do this better, I think. And books like this one, Radical Remission, really helps us do that. So another is embracing social support. So how do we feel about other people? Do we trust other people? Do we have loving relationships with other people? Do we respect people? Our relationship with other human beings is an important reflection on how we be with ourselves in a whole being, well-being. I'm pretty reclusive myself, and so I don't have a lot of connection with people aside from when I'm doing interviews or when I'm coaching and training and those kinds of things. But when I go to the store, I'm not reclusive and hiding out and fearful and resistant and grumpy. I'm actually very alive and very engaging and very connected. I'm being the fullest expression of myself. And that's what's important here is how do we be the fullest expression of ourselves? And so often we're taught not to be able to do that. You shouldn't do that. You can't do that. You don't have the right to do that. And really you do. And so many of us who are reading self-help, or if you're listening to this or other self-help YouTube processes, is you're looking to thrive and to be the fullest you. And so when we look at ourselves and go, yeah, no, I can't do that, I'm not allowed, there's a diminishing of ourselves. And that again creates dis-ease. Marge says, just to be clear, when you say everyone did this, you mean everyone in the study who had a radical remission. That's correct. Thank you. So Kelly Turner interviewed thousands of people. And in those interviews, she looked at what are the things that people did, what are the factors that everyone that were available, 75 factors, I think she talks about, but only 9 factors was something that each individual who had gone through this study actually did. So yeah, thanks for that clarification. Releasing suppressed emotions. This is really hard for a lot of people. As I was mentioning, my client who was very clear about the fact that she doesn't share her emotions and she doesn't actually express her emotions. And when we do that, that energy gets stuck in our system. We are a whole being, and that means that we're an energetic being. We are an electrical being. We are a nervous being. We are all kinds of intelligences and things going on that most of us don't understand or know. But our emotions, our energy and motions, that's what energy or emotions is energy, emotions, influence us. And when when we don't express our emotions, when we don't allow the release of grief or anger or sadness or whatever that is, it gets stuck in our system, and that creates dis-ease. So the more that we can release those suppressed emotions, we can come back to this state of well-being and whole being. Using herbs and supplements, changing our diet, following our intuition is really important. And if you think about it, it all makes sense if you're looking at well-being and whole being, because our intuition is the knowing. It's the high self knowing of what is and what's to unfold for us. And when we follow our intuition, life can be so much more easy and effortless, and we follow our own knowing. We're trained in our consensus view of reality to ignore that and to follow the authority of other people, the external people, everyone who's external. We're told to listen to the experts, listen to the doctors, listen to the therapists, listen to those experts that have a knowing, but they don't have your knowing, and only you have your knowing. And when we dismiss that knowing and we disrespect that and we don't trust our knowing, that creates disease. So the more that we can get more aligned with that, the more we will be in whole being and well-being. And in that state of knowing and in that state of intuition, there's no fear. It's pretty remarkable. I don't know if you've ever experienced that for yourself when you have an intuitive hit. I think I need to do this. There's no fear there. There's just the knowing. And more of my work as a transformational coach and training people is to focus on that knowing that we all have, and that I want to support and empower people to cultivate in themselves. Hence these live videos. Taking control of your health is a really important thing. We dismiss our own knowing. We dismiss our own abilities to take care of ourselves and heal ourselves. And we abdicate our power, generally speaking, to doctors and to medical practitioners, we abdicate our power. And I was reading today that there's a lot of research in the type, the type A personality, type B personality. And there's a type C personality, and C personalities tend to be passive, and type C personalities also tend to get cancer. Isn't that interesting? I think that the statistics was that type A personalities tended to get heart issues, heart conditions, and heart attacks, and those kinds of things, stress related. There's a type B that's more of a laid back kind of person, and then type C is passive. And that passiveness sometimes is what they found is it's related to helplessness, a sense of helplessness, and type C personalities tend to get cancer, where there's a tendency towards seeing oneself as helpless. And I find that really interesting. And I would say that most of us, in some ways, have a tendency towards helplessness, but we can deny it or ignore it or create a facade and or survival strategies that keep us from knowing that part of ourselves, when it's really important for us to understand and appreciate that sometimes in our world and sometimes in our lives that we are helpless. I've had 3 different people this week who have shared situations where they are helpless. One, their mother died in an accident, and they're just totally powerless over that. And another person is in the midst of a lot of those forest fires that are happening in Washington. It's like there is this truth that there are moments in our reality where we are experiencing powerlessness and helplessness, and it doesn't have to be the way of living. It's just part of who we are in our existence. So this is really important when we start to take control and we start to empower ourselves in ways that perhaps we've never even considered. We can cultivate well-being and whole being. Another client of mine is married to a person, and the relationship isn't good. It's not working for him, and in that he's it's a relationship that's not allowing him to grow. And he feels dependent on his partner, and in that he feels like he doesn't have he isn't empowered to make choices for himself, and he capitulates in himself. It's which is different than surrender. He gets small and kind of codependent. And the more that he can begin to grow that capacity to go, wait, I don't have to choose to do that. I don't have to choose to capitulate myself or be less than in the presence of this other person. I can be my whole self. And he shared examples where he was his whole self. Like most of his life, he's sharing that he's his whole self and dynamic and loving and caring and has good boundaries. But when this person shows up, boom, he does something else. It's interesting. So to cultivate whole being for this person, they have to begin to take control. So when we take control of ourselves emotionally and spiritually and physically, we cultivate this place of whole being and well-being. So that's really great. So again, the sense of powerlessness or helplessness, we will configure itself in all kinds of ways, as well as unresolved or unexpressed anger at being violated in any number of ways. We're trained to compensate and find other ways to release that energy, but we're not allowed to actually, quite often. I know for me, I wasn't allowed to be angry. So I was always sad. I was always sad. Sad was okay in my family, not anger. And so it took me a long time to be able to be with my anger in a way that was healthy, not destructive with my anger, but actually healthy. And that's what I'm wanting to work for. Want you to do as well, is to look at and explore, how are you being in your life? How are you being with your body? How are you being with your emotional self and your spiritual self in relation to this whole being, well-being? So another thing I want to mention, there's a couple things, because with illness, sometimes when people get ill, and there is this sense of, okay, you created that illness because you either ignored your health or because of something, then we feel like, oh, I have to feel guilty about that. So I want to talk about that for a minute. But I also want to acknowledge that sometimes we choose to take disease on or illness on as a way to learn who we are, how we learn to grow our capacity to know ourselves, to grow beyond being a victim, being helpless, being at the mercy of medical doctors, being at the mercy of being told what to do, that we learn who we are in here and go, no, I don't want to do that anymore, or I want to do something different. That we begin to know who we are. We begin to empower ourselves to know who we are. We begin to see ourselves differently and whole, even within an illness or a disease. Stephen Hawkins had this very debilitating disease, but lived a very full and thriving life, having children, being married, being brilliant, giving so much to the world. And yet he was inside this body that was very, didn't function well. So when we can see that and go, okay, how did he do that? How do you do that? Or veterans of war who come back with no limbs and yet can come to find a place of acceptance and resolve within themselves that they are valid and thriving and precious and whole, even though the physical body may be not what everybody else thinks is normal. So we can see sometimes, and probably just about every time that I have dealt with people who've had physical disease of any kind, even in major knee injuries or athletic injuries, there's been some element there that was part of their learning opportunity that they needed to work through in order to become who they know themselves to be. So illness can be a spiritual path. And 99% of the time it is a spiritual path, in a sense that if we've brought to us, for however we did that, an illness or disease, it's a lesson. It's an opportunity to learn. And the more that we can ask that question, like, what are you here to teach me? We become open to the intelligences of all diseases, in all of life, in fact, just all of life. But when we're in the presence of a disease that seems bigger than us, it's like, what do you have to teach me? What am I here in this relationship with you, this disease, that I'm here to learn? And when we can look at it that way, we can learn so much about ourselves. There was a woman, I really like this story, a woman who had brain cancer, a tumor in her brain. And she tried all various numbers of therapies and surgeries and radiations, and whatever she did, it always grew back. And she was angry, and it's like that thing, and she felt helpless and powerless over it. And then she said, the only thing I haven't tried yet is to love this cancer. And so she began to shower love on her cancer. And within a very short period of time, that cancer went away, that tumor went away. I love that story, because we think that illnesses and disease is something to be hated, and it's something to be fought against. And we're going to battle cancer, and we're going to, fight, and, all of those kinds of words of battling and cancer and war, when it's like, yeah, no, this is something that we need to look at differently. And when we can do that, again, we let go of the fear, because we think we have to battle this, otherwise it's going to overtake us. We're powerless again, that helplessness, versus, okay, let's look at this relationship differently. And when we can begin to do that, then we drop the data of it's a bad thing, it's a scary thing, it's a terrible thing, it's a thing that's going to ruin my life. When in truth, many people, many people who have had cancer or other diseases, but cancer specifically, who have said, this changed my life. I got to know who I was because of this. So it's an opportunity, a growth opportunity. And does it have to be the only way? No. We can shift our well-being and whole being to find other ways to grow ourselves without having to do an illness or disease. It just is one way. Okay. Children is one way to grow ourselves spiritually. Our partners is another way to grow ourselves spiritually. Our work life is another way. So there's all these different ways that we can grow ourselves spiritually, and disease is one of those ways. Hi, Fred. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for popping in. Any thoughts about it? The three people that are here? Okay. I'm just looking at my notes. So again, one of my intentions here is to assist in demystifying symptoms of diseases and illnesses, and make it, it's just an hour, and I've already talked an hour, but to look at our physical being and say, oh, look at that. I'm developing a cough. Here's a great example. These are little things. When I drink milk in my coffee, if I do it too regularly, I feel stuff in my throat. I can tell you it's because of the milk. I can tell you that. Okay. Now, do I cut milk out totally? I don't. I use it when I use it, moderation, if you will. But it's an indication that my body is telling me something. When I was eating a lot of wheat, I had a lot of gunk in my eyes. My eyes were always doing this, and it was kind of cloudy. When I stopped eating so much wheat, the cloudiness went away. So our bodies are constantly giving us messages of what works and what doesn't. When we're emotionally distraught, when we're overwhelmed, we can feel that in our bodies. And again, most people have an intention for well-being and whole being, but when they are out of alignment with whole being and well-being, then they don't go, okay, how can I be so that I come back into wholeness and well-being? Most of us, including me, will go to our actions of choice or our drugs of choice to ignore and avoid and distract ourselves from what's feeling uncomfortable. In the Alcoholics Anonymous book, Bill W., who wrote a lot of that book, if not all of it, and said the greatest cause of addictions is restless, irritable discontent. So anytime that we feel a little restless or irritable, or we feel discontented, we do something to take our minds off of that. We distract ourselves. So in this case, it's alcohol. In other case, it might be food or sex, pornography, or debting, going and buying stuff, or worrying. People worry as an addiction. Really, truly, I know I did, and I am getting better at it. So, or physical activity, just being active, mentally active, whatever that is. So when we're restless, irritable, or discontent, we tend to go towards certain patternings to minimize that discontent, versus being able to go, okay, so in this moment, I'm experiencing some restless, irritable discontent. I feel some emotionalness. I feel some sensations that I'm uncomfortable with. What is that? What's causing that? What happened? In a sense, what what in my environment or what happened in my mind that triggered that sensation of discomfort or irritability. And so when we can ask ourselves those questions, we stay in the moment. We can. A lot of people don't like being uncomfortable, right? We don't like being uncomfortable, and over time, that uncomfortableness, which won't go away unless we address it directly, and we cover it up, we mask it with our addictive substances and activities, eventually will deepen into our system and cause symptoms. And we go, oh my God, how did that happen? So what I'm saying is we have the capacity to, in the moment, say, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. I feel a little bit irritable right now. What's the cause of that? What's the source of that? And if I sit long enough, I'll go, the source of that is that I was visiting my friend Gertrude, and her house was like really, like not really, it just made me feel really yucky. And so now I feel yucky and irritable. It's like, okay, so that's the source of that. Being kind of, we have all kinds of sources of our irritability. Sometimes our spouse will talk to us in a way that doesn't feel respectful. It feels dismissive, and that hurts our feelings. And so now we feel hurt. And now what do we do with that? What do we do with that hurt feeling? Rather than saying, hey, when you talk to me like that, I actually feel dismissive. I don't know if do you mean to be dismissive? And that's a good opportunity to clear the air. Most of us don't do that. Most of us go, I feel dismissed. Now I'm going to go buy myself a new pair of rain boots. We do something to compensate for our spouse talking to us in a dismissive way, as opposed to saying, wow, when somebody talks to me like that, I don't like it. And I don't like it when you talk to me about like that. Let's talk about what's going on for you. What's the source in you that has you talk to me like that? Because it's not okay. Those are the ways that we can stay in whole being and well-being. Most of us don't do that. And so if you go, yeah, I do that, you're not alone. But to move ourselves to what's next, to stay in whole being and well-being, that's where we can go. We all have the capacity to empower ourselves to stay in whole being and well-being. We do. So I want to say this because I think it's really important, and it's coming from sort of an intuitive moment to say this. So we all have that capacity to be in whole being, well-being. We all have the capacity to bring ourselves, stay in the moment, stay out of fear, and go, hey, I'm irritable right now. What's the source of that? Oh, it's a conversation I had with children, my child. I can go have another conversation, bring myself back. We can do that. We can self-empower. We're not powerless. When we choose not to do that for ourselves, we are sovereign beings. We have the capacity to do that. We have the capacity to empower ourselves to well-being. When we don't do that, we are choosing to give our power away. We are choosing to give our power away. And this is true in terms of cancer or other illnesses. We are choosing to give our power away to doctors or to the disease itself or to whatever it is. We are choosing. And so we just have to be conscious about that. Do we have to feel guilty about that? No, because now you feel guilty. Guilty is not one of those emotions that's going to create healing. Won't do it, no matter what. So if you feel guilty about taking responsibility and going, wow, look what I do to myself, that's not going to help. But acknowledging, wow, I've been choosing to be this way in my life, and it's not helping me. It's causing me more aches and pains and more symptoms in my life. I can choose to do something different. Is my life worth that enough? Again, coming back to Kelly Turner's nine factors. Do I have a strong enough reason to have a good life and give myself that good life and not keep giving somebody else power over me? Do I have a good reason to take my power back? incrementally. I mean, you can take it back bigly, but a lot of people have to start small. Do I have a right to embrace support for who I am? Do I have a right to that? So these are the questions that we can ask ourselves. Marge says, I guess I have to wake myself up when I notice myself pulling away. I'm sorry, I have to back up. Marge says, I need a way to remember to be curious about discomfort or irritation. I'm so good at disconnecting before I realize I'm irritated. I guess I have to wake myself up when I notice myself pulling away. Yes. And we're so good at numbing out those, all of us have relationships with people that can be irritating. And so we just learn we turn the noise, we numb ourselves to the noise, but that noise is irritating, whether it's the TV set or our spouses, our dogs barking, whatever it is, that's the irritant. We have learned and trained ourselves to tune it out. But by doing that, we create a lot of irritability and aches and pains. My mom had a lot of arthritis, and I'm sure because she wasn't allowed basically to be herself. She had 9 kids and she had a very demanding husband, and so she had to kind of constrain herself and not be aware of who she truly was inside herself. And so she developed a lot of arthritis. That to me it was a symptom of her inability or unwillingness to really truly be who she was in the world, her fullest expression in herself. That's just what I think about that. So we tend to tune out our irritabilities, but it's easy enough to go, oh, I think I'll go get a cookie, or I think I'll go buy myself. I like to buy things. So it's like, oh, I think I'll think about what I need for my fish pond or whatever. And so those things shift our irritability to something happy or exciting, at least for the moment, as opposed to really going clearly and going, I gotta be more honoring of this being so that I'm not distracting myself from what is in this moment, what is true for me in this being. So there again, the intuition of my intuition keeps saying, you got to say this, you got to talk about this. And so I'm going to talk about it now. And I think I'm a little bit sidestepping it because it seems a little bit strange. So I'll just say it that way. I talk about illness as being a spiritual path. One of the things that we know is, as a vibrational being and as a divine aspect of the divine, as an aspect of the divine, we are whole, right? There's no requirement for healing because we are whole. Because we don't believe that way in this particular plane, we don't believe that we are whole, then we believe that we can get dis-ease, and we believe we can get illnesses and things that can happen in terms of disease. When I think of Jesus Christ, there's the parable of where a person touched his cloak and he was healed. And it's because the vibrational resonance of Jesus was such that being in his presence, people were healed immediately. Some people that were dead came back to life because of his vibrational resonance. And this place of whole being and well-being is a place of higher resonance. We all have the capacity. We all have Christ consciousness. It's part of our divinity. It just is, in my mind. And as Christ consciousness, we have that capacity to grow the capacity to heal ourselves, to be whole. And I'm finding that the more that I do spiritual practices in the form of some meditations and such, that things are disappearing. Some of the skin cancer-y things on my body are going away. They're falling off. They're going away. And that's not with any medical, medical anything. It's just happening because I'm raising my vibration. I'm raising my my frequencies where disease does not exist in the human body. And that's pretty cool. And there's a lot of research about this. And so that brings in this book, which is Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter, which is all about how we perceive ourselves in the negative or nocebos and the positive. So placebos are positive thoughts, positive beliefs, positive principles. And when we live in the positive stuff happens. When we live in the nocebo, the negative, oh, I can get sick, I can get hurt, that helpless, powerless victim, then we start to create the opening for that. So this is a really, really good book. He's got a lot of YouTube videos out, which I would highly recommend looking at. But the idea is that we have that Christ consciousness that Jesus had, Jesus Christ consciousness. We have that capacity within us. We have the capacity to heal other people. We have the capacity to heal ourselves. And we need to be in that whole being, well-being, and in the knowing of that in order to create that level of more whole being, well-being, in a sense that the more that we create whole being, well-being, the more whole being, well-being we have. And my experience thus far is that it just keeps growing. And I didn't even know this existed where I'm at. I didn't know this existed. And so every day there's a new element of wholeness and well-being that I'm experiencing, spiritually or emotionally or health-wise, all kinds of things. I'm having experiences in my life that I just never thought would happen. And it's because I'm really focused on growing myself in all ways, but really focusing on who I am as this spiritual being having this human experience. So the hard part was talking about Jesus and, the sense that he has that vibrational resonance, a frequency that healed people like just in a heartbeat. And we all have that. There's a particular woman, and I can't remember her name, but she was seconds away from death. They just were waiting for her to die. And in that moment, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. She went into this state of being where she met her father, who she thought didn't love her. And in that moment, she had this immediate sense of love beyond what she ever had experienced before, and realized that he always loved her and never had stopped loving her. So in this moment that she had this recognition of love and a moment of experiencing love, she came back into her body, and within a very short period of time began to heal all of in major lumps, major tumors. They all started going away because she had this capacity to move beyond the limited thinking that we think we are, and the fear that is caught up with that level of thinking. Limited thinking, usually fear is engaged in that. And so when we can begin to say, look, whole being is the most important thing to me, and I'm going to notice where I'm fearful, then that helps me. That's a little bit of a compass that keeps me on track with whole being. But also, when I'm not in whole being, I can pay attention to that. Because if I'm not in whole being, I'm either creating something in my mind with certain beliefs, or it may be something that's coming up for healing. And if it's coming up for healing, it might come up as part of a disease process. It's coming up for healing. So it's not just a disease that you're a victim to. It's a disease that's coming up, or some element of life that is coming up for you to look at and to be with, so that you can grow yourself and know yourself in your fullest sense, not just in the small, pathetic victim powerless person, but in this, wow, who am I in here? And that's the gift that we can give and be given through our relationships with diseases and illnesses. It might be we don't know these things until we know them, but quite often, perhaps an illness that one person carries is in service to another person who might need to learn how to care for, or we don't have an idea of what all of this is unless we do. But we don't know what this is about, but we can look at it as a gift. We can look at it as something to be explored, and not to be just, let's just cut it out. Let's just radiate it. Let's just burn the shit out of it. Let's just do all that stuff, the chemotherapy. We can do it in a way and look at it in a way that is revering to the body and honoring of the body and the heart and the soul. And that's why, I really appreciate this book again, this Radical Remission, because many of the people who used these 9 factors also used traditional medical procedures of surgery and chemo and radiation. It isn't just alternative places, but they may have used alternative with traditional medicines, as in cancer or the cancer treatments. And some people did, some people didn't. So, anything is possible. But when we listen to ourselves, when you listen to yourself and say, here's what I'm being with, and how do I shift this? How do I be with this in a state of truth without the fear? Now you're having an opportunity to bring that closer to your own healing. And that's what we really, really want. Joe Dispenza tells a story when he was a cyclist, a major athlete, and he had a major cycling accident, which broke his back in many, many pieces. And the doctor said he would never walk, and he would, he just a terrible, horrible prognosis. And he said, nope, I'm going to heal myself. And he did. And then that's part of what this book is that process of how he healed himself. And here's how we can heal ourselves and bring ourselves into whole being and well-being. So healing ourselves might be the trauma of our past lives, or our trauma of our childhood. So it doesn't even have to be physical, but it can be the emotional dis-ease. That can be mental dis-ease. We can heal ourselves, and we can bring ourselves back to wholeness and health and well-being, because we can. And that's a blessing and a gift to know that, and to share this with you at this level, because even 3 years ago, I wouldn't be able to talk to you this clearly about my beliefs that we have this capacity. I'd be too scared that I'm saying stuff that's stupid, or scared that you would reject what I'm saying. And now I don't really care if you reject what I'm saying, because for me, I'm in alignment with my highest truth, my highest knowing, and my highest good. And that's what I want to share with you. Anything else? Coming back to resistance, why do we resist taking care of ourselves? Why do we resist seeing? There's a lot of science that says a vegetarian diet is so much healthier for us and in the planet. And why do we resist going in the direction of greater health for ourselves? We don't want to change, but we want the health, right? We want to live a high quality life. We don't want to get sick, but we resist doing what we need to do in order to really bring ourselves to that level of fulfillment. I balance that for myself. I'm constantly challenged to, because I love hot dogs and I love meat. And at the same time, feeling into my body and going, yeah, I need less of that. And the same with dairy or cheese. There are things that I can begin to honor and recognize more clearly. And like I said, honor those knowings versus resisting those knowings. Marge said, scared that you're so out there. Yes, I am scared that I'm so out there. And at the same time, when you read Joe Dispenza or listen to Deepak Chopra or Kelly Turner or Marianne Williamson, Bruce Lipton, they're all saying the same thing and more and more. But it's scary to actually say it. But yeah, I know I'm not alone. And that's the cool thing, is to know that there's so many people out there that know this. And that gives us so much more hope. It gives us so many more tools to really make a difference for ourselves in that whole being, well-being. And we don't have to make any great sacrifice. We don't have to make any great, huge anything. We just have to incrementally begin to include things that will support and empower our whole being and our well-being. And that's what we want. And Marge, I see where you say, I want to go there with you. That would be great. I would love it, because the more, the merrier, for sure. So notice notice when resistance shows up. And again, like everything else, resistance is where we get that that irritability. And you go, what's the source of that? If I want well-being and I want a thriving life, what's the resistance about? What is that? And not just ask it rhetorically, but actually look and listen for the answer of that. What is this resistant here to teach me? What is it this resistance here to do for me? Because I'm in charge. I'm responsible. I'm the one that gets to choose either to listen to the resistance or to avoid it or ignore it. It's up to me. It's not the resistance that has power over me. It's me giving the power to the resistance, or giving the power to that part of me that wants to avoid and distract this whole conversation and go have a hot dog. So I am as vulnerable as the rest of us, as everyone else, to want to ignore and avoid the scary stuff, or what I've created as scary, but what's really just uncomfortable. And what's uncomfortable is generally what we don't understand and what we feel uncertainty about, and that creates the fear. But when we can get comfortable with, okay, it's just a sensation. Why am I afraid of this sensation? And we can get clear with that. It's just a sensation. Then we don't have to be afraid of it. But generally speaking, our sensations are coming from a past trauma or past whatever. And so we feel this sensation. We go, oh my God, that's going to happen. Or I see something on my face. I go, oh my God, I'm going to die. Because that's what we do. But we can go, wait, no, let's stay in whole being, well-being. Let's stay in wisdom. Let's stay in clarity. And let's pick up some books, or let's pick up some, look at some YouTube videos or something that's going to keep us aligned with what we know to be true. Your highest truth, your highest knowing, and your highest good. That's what we want. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it for today. Thank you for those who have been with me so far. And again, if you haven't already liked and subscribed this video, I would love that. If you'd like, I would love it if you would leave me a comment to say, here's how I struggle with my disease. Here's how I see it as less than a gift. Maybe you've had experiences with diseases and it has been a gift for you. I would love you if you would comment and share that with us as well. All right. Thanks again. Bye for now.